Welcome back to Zangeki no Reginleiv, and before we get to anything, I'm going to do a little bit of forging, and in particular, I'm going to forge this. This is the level 2 version of Frey's regular longsword. It's obviously a little stronger, and that'll open up a new forging path, but we're also going to go over to Freya's end and forge this. It's Freya's version of a greatsword. And they pretty much handle the same, but you'll notice that it looks a little different, particularly with how Freya handles it. That also opened up a new forging path, but we blew all the water crystals on something else, so we can't really do that right now. Now, this next mission is going to involve Freya, and I'm going to switch over to the greatsword, but I am also going to swap out the lightning flash bow for her regular level 1 longbow. I'm doing this because for the next mission I want a bow that will actually hit things I'm aiming at. And that will bring us into the next mission, this one for Freya. So Freya's going north with Regin and his tribe, while Freya is following everybody else south. Now this mission is a little bit lengthy, so it's going to end up taking the entire video. It's another one of those missions where you have to follow the NPCs along through a set path, and they have to reach a certain point for the mission to end. For this, we're supposed to follow Sigmund, Helgi, and Bellund. I'm probably butchering his name, but we're following them through this path to help them retreat to the forts to the south. Now, giants are going to appear along the path, but for the first few instances of this mission, they're actually going to appear on that ridge I'm currently looking at. So you have to wait for a couple of dialogue sequences to go through, and eventually some giants are going to spawn, and you won't be able to see them at first, at least not with just the regular viewpoint, but they will show up on the radar. And there are a couple of ways that you can approach this. Number one is you can just let them come down the ridge and come toward you, which if you do that, you're more likely to get some of these guardsmen helping you out, and there they just spawned. Another way is to just charge forward away from the group and try to take them down as they come through the tree line. This bow in particular, with its lock-on feature, is very useful for that. The trade-off for this method is, you can see they're dropping crystals. You won't be able to climb up the ridge to get those. So it's more beneficial if you wait for them to drop down the ridge and start advancing toward you first. Frankly, you should just let them proceed toward you as much as possible. That way, you're not really far away from the group you're trying to escort, just chasing after crystal drops. So you can see that the greatsword handles pretty much the same for Freya as it does for Frey. Just having fun launching a couple of giants into the air and then smacking them back into the ground. But the only real difference is that Freya's greatswords tend to be a little smaller than Frey's. Also, if you notice during the equipment screen, she carries it differently than Frey does. Frey basically wields it like just any other two-handed sword out in front of him, while Freya kind of like dangles it down at her side like Pyramid Head with a great knife. The next wave should spawn. Oh, wait, nope, there it is right now. So we've got Sigmund, Helgi, and a smattering of guards here to help out. Again, they're coming down this ridge, and I'm actually going to wait for most of them this time, because I don't need to make getting crystals, even the more common crystals, more difficult than it needs to be. I mean, you could technically go back to certain levels and grind for crystals of various types, but I'd like to avoid doing that as much as possible. Preferably for this playthrough, I wouldn't do it at all. And I just stopped paying attention to the giant that can do the most damage. Pro tip, pay attention to the giant that can deal the most damage to you, which also happens to be the largest enemy on screen. Anyway, I'm going to try and use Freya's bow to lock onto at least the weapon, the head, and preferably the arm. I'm trying to avoid torso shots because aside from just killing the giant, it doesn't really benefit me in terms of extra crystals I could get. That's one downside to this, is that the bow that has the lock-on feature isn't particularly strong. So it's usually not the most effective thing to use against anything except for the smallest of the giants. And it doesn't look like I got any special crystals out of that. Although, I have my equipment choices to thank for that more than anything else. That and my completely forgetting to use the rod. Now, if you've been paying attention to the radar, another group of giants has already spawned, and it is not from the same ridge. It is from much further up the road, because while this has been going on, the other NPCs have been advancing further down the path. So I have a lot of catch-up to do. And unfortunately, Sigmund, Helgi, and a bunch of those guards also have some catching up to do, which means there aren't that many defenses in place for the villagers here. So I'm going to have to do a lot more of the work, well, more than usual at least. And then again, I did most of the work anyway, so just try not to rely on guards as being even a reasonably effective line of defense against the giants. Even these little ones. They tend to get smacked around very easily, and even though you can technically bring them back with various health items, it's usually best to try and avoid having any of the NPCs or like guard characters fall in battle. Just makes things a little more complex than they need to be. And it looks like, yeah, we just have this one straggler left. Now this mission isn't quite over yet, and if you look carefully you can see some of the villagers trying to walk up the sides of the cliff, which not going to work out. So I actually got the sequence kind of mixed up when I recorded this. I was dashing ahead because I thought that was where the giants would spawn, but no, they're actually going to spawn way back at that same ridge where 2 previous waves spawned. The NPCs are a little slower to react to this one. Also, they're further away than they were the first couple of times that giants came through this area. So the NPC guards and named characters aren't going to help until very late in this wave. Usually when I'm just down to the last mid-sized giant. No matter though, this is actually a fairly small wave. Particularly when Freya has this particular bow, and she can just lock on to all the other smaller enemies and take them out in one shot. Just to make it a little interesting though, I'm going to use my magic rod instead. This also makes it a little bit easier, assuming you can adjust for the arc of the shots, to do things like destroy limbs, destroy weapons. Not sure if I'll go for the headshots with this, because that's a little tough to pinpoint. What sucks about doing it this way is that not just compensating for the arc, but also compensating for the fact that the giant is still going to be moving around a lot. Okay, good, we got the weapon at least. So you have to account not just for the arc, but also the time it takes the shots to travel to their intended target. And in that time, the giant is usually going to be moving around a lot. And I guess that giant was feeling very dramatic with that pose it struck earlier. Pretty sure that's just the animation of it trying to step on some of the NPCs, which are here now. Although you might notice, another wave of giants spawned on the opposite side of the map. Zangeki no Reginleiv really likes to do that. And I'm trying a few shots on the head with the bow, honestly not expecting it to work. Because the thing is, if I were by myself, I could probably get away with this and eventually decap it. But there are other NPCs here now who are just shooting any part of the giant they can reach. So yeah, not getting the decap on that one, but still getting a crap ton of crystals. And I am in no particular hurry to get to the last wave, because I want to make sure that I'm collecting a bunch of crystals. That way I can continue doing weapon upgrades and weapon forging at a very steady pace. I mean, you can get away with just keeping your low-level weapons up to a certain point, but it's generally a good idea to make sure you're progressing regularly through the weapon trees. That's more so the case, I think, with the higher difficulties, because even though this is normal, it's still not particularly difficult. So anyway, here's another grouping of giants. And with the greatsword in particular, this is not going to be too difficult. I love that powered up spin attack that you can do with it. Thing is, it may just be me, because I struggle with this sometimes in general, but I struggle sometimes to get in my head what the approximate range is for this. Because I always seem to be a little too far away from some enemies for things like the strong attacks to register. Or, another thing I'll do is, even though you don't really have to swing the Wii Remote hard to do this, I'll think, oh, it's a strong attack, I gotta swing harder. And no, you don't have to do that at all. And that causes my aim to be off, and I end up just swinging over the top of or underneath enemies. The end of this level doesn't come when you kill the last giant, which we're going to do very shortly. And it doesn't come from listening to a particularly long dialogue tree. It comes from a really, really short dialogue tree that happens right after killing the last giant. Like, it just started, and it's going to end now. So yeah, just a few seconds of dialogue, and then the level ends. Oh, nope. It actually kept going, and then got cut off. So, we're pretty good on regular mana crystals, but I do gotta stock up on water and ground crystals again. Okay, time to switch back to Frey. And in the process, I'm going to change up his weapons a bit. I'm going to get rid of the hammer, and since we just forged it, I'm going to take his level 2 longsword. And another thing I'm going to do is swap out the spear for that bow that we forged earlier, Thor's bow. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with that particular bow, and you'll see what I mean when we get to the next episode, which I'm sorry if this episode was a little dry compared to the other ones, but I'm going to tell you right now, next time on Zangeki no Reginleiv, this game is going to jump the shark several times over. Several times.